Welcome back to another Explainer. Today we have a truly fascinating and honestly pretty heavy topic to unpack. We're going to explore how classical Islamic texts strictly prohibit things like torture, coercion, and intimidation. And just a quick heads up before we jump in, to honor the traditional sensibilities of the topic we're exploring today, we're completely skipping any drawings of people in our visuals. The whole idea is to keep us laser-focused on the primary texts, the historical accounts, and the actual frameworks we're about to explore.
Alright, so here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with sacred rights and honor, then dive into suspicion and spying, move into the prohibition of torture, look at justice over oppression, and finally wrap up with the 6 principles of prosperity. Let's get right into it. Section 1. Sacred Rights and Honor, the Foundations of Sanctity. To really understand Islamic law when it comes to coercion and state power, we have to start right at the absolute foundation of human sanctity. You literally cannot understand the rules without understanding this baseline. This quote is from the Prophet Muhammad's farewell address, and it's profound. He was speaking in the sacred city of Mecca, right during the sacred day of sacrifice, and he uses that specific moment to declare that a person's blood, their wealth, and their honor are just as sacred as that very day and that very city. He's essentially elevating basic human rights to a divine level of protection. So breaking that down, blood, wealth, honor, and bodies. The crucial takeaway here is that a person's physical body, their property, and their reputation are entirely, completely protected. They're sacred. The state, or any other individual for that matter, absolutely cannot subject them to unwarranted harm, physical abuse, or humiliation. That is the non-negotiable baseline.
Which brings us to Section 2, Suspicion and Spying, Protecting the Private Sphere.
Okay, so now that we've established those physical and moral boundaries, how does this framework protect individuals from something like state surveillance? Well, the strict phrasing of this principle sets a crystal clear boundary against invading someone's privacy. It explicitly warns that acting on mere suspicion and actively digging around trying to uncover the hidden sins of others is fundamentally unlawful. But it's one thing to read a rule, it's another to see how it actually played out in history.
Listen to this incredible historical sequence involving Umar ibn al-Khattab. He was the caliph, the actual head of state. He's out on a night patrol in Medina, and he spots a glowing lamp. He hears loud voices coming from inside a house and strongly suspects that the people inside are drinking wine, which, remember, was a crime. But his companion, Abdurrahman ibn Auf, stops him and just reminds him of the Quranic verse that says, "Do not spy." Now notice the resolution here. Omar immediately turns away. He just leaves them alone. The head of state literally halted an active investigation of a crime because the prohibition against spying absolutely superseded his own suspicion. That is huge.
Section 3. The Prohibition of Torture, Absolute Limits on Punishment.
Building directly off that profound respect for privacy we just talked about, the classical texts lay down absolute, undeniable legal limits against physical torture and abuse. The statement is simple and it leaves zero room for misinterpretation. Allah punishes those who torture people in this world. This was famously cited by a man named Hisham bin Hakim. He was traveling to Syria and saw local inhabitants, the Nabateans, being completely unjustly tortured. The authorities actually had them standing out in the blazing sun, pouring olive oil on their heads, all just to squeeze tax payments out of them. Hisham saw this and immediately invoked this exact text to condemn the authorities right to their faces.
So we really have to draw a careful line between lawful enforcement and unlawful oppression. Obviously, a state has to enforce laws, right? There are prescribed punishments, and a ruler can absolutely jail someone for a very strictly limited period just for investigation. But you cannot, under any circumstances, cross that line into torture just because you suspect something. You can't hold someone indefinitely hoping for information, and you cannot harm creation without right.
And what's wild is just how comprehensive these categories are. We aren't just talking about extreme, state-level political torture. These strict prohibitions apply across all everyday interactions. It's expressly forbidden to unjustly beat Muslims. Back when slavery existed, if a master slapped a slave, the required legal atonement, the kafara, was that they actually had to set that slave free, just for a slap. Striking the face, even if it's an animal's face, brings a divine curse. And get this, you can't even playfully frighten a sleeping companion with a rope. It's actually outlawed. The sheer psychological safety of the individual is legally protected.
And the texts provide highly specific, real-world anecdotes of accountability to enforce this. In one very famous incident, the Prophet actually caught a companion named Abu Masud beating his slave. The prophet stepped in and bluntly warned him that Allah had way more power over him than he had over that slave. Abu Masud was so shaken by this that he instantly freed the man on the spot. And the prophet's response was a stark warning: if you had not done that, the fire would have touched you. The accountability was immediate and it was deeply existential.
Moving to Section 4, Justice over Oppression, the Philosophy of Governance.
So zooming out from those individual interactions and personal accountability, let's explore how these exact same rules govern state authority and societal prosperity on a macro level. Classical scholars were incredibly clear on the nature of state power. Imam Ghazali coined this famous, brilliant phrase, religion and authority are twins. Another giant of Islamic thought, Ibn Taymiyyah, argued pretty much the exact same thing. If authority gets divorced from religion and comprehensive justice, the entire affairs of the people are just completely spoiled. Basically, authority demands a moral anchor.
The authors of these sources argue that when we look around at modern police states today, places where secret police roam the streets, citizens are subjected to arbitrary torture, and people just languish in dark prisons for years on end, these systems are in direct, blatant violation of classical Islamic law. The executive power has to be limited by the Sharia. Whenever it's not, law enforcement instantly turns into tyranny.
Finally, Section 5, 6 Principles of Prosperity, Al-Mawardi's Framework.
So, the big question is, how do we actually fix it? To shift from a broken, oppressive state into a prosperous one, the renowned classical scholar Al-Mawardi outlined a highly specific framework in his book Adab ad-Dunya wa Din. And according to him, to put the world right, to heal a society and curative despotism, you don't actually need 100 different complex things. You literally just need 6, exactly 6 foundational principles.
Here they are: a followed religion, an all-powerful authority, comprehensive justice, general security, perpetual fertility, and ample hope. This right here is the ultimate blueprint for transforming a despotic, fearful environment into a secure and thriving civilization. Notice how comprehensive justice and general security sit right at the heart of this framework. Why? Because without them, you absolutely cannot have ample hope. A society that is governed by fear, by torture, and by constant spying, it has zero hope for the future.
The overarching lesson for all of this is perfectly captured in this Quranic verse. Justice and law enforcement simply cannot be based on the arbitrary whims, the suspicions, or the desires of a ruler or a police force. It just doesn't work. The very moment that authority starts operating on whim rather than divine law and evidence, absolute ruin follows. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final thought to ponder. Based on everything we've just explored today, all the way from the foundational sacredness of human honor down to the incredibly strict limits on surveillance and physical punishment, can true legitimate authority ever actually exist without absolute and comprehensive justice? It's a big question. Keep learning, stay focused, and I will see you in the next explainer.